G'day, everyone. Well, it's arrived. The last game or the last round of the National Rugby League for 2022. Wow, what a season it has been. So many good games this weekend and a semi-final series, which I think looks like living up to, maybe even surpassing what was an outstanding semi-final series last year. This is the NRL Market Watch podcast. It's proudly brought to you by the good folk, even the bad folk up there at topsport.com.au. The usual suspects are in attendance. I am talking about Tristan Merlehan and Gerard Condon from readingtheplay.com.au, who I think, just judging by the look of both of them, they might be just a little bit hungry and in need of a good feed around lunchtime. How are you, gentlemen?
Yeah, g'day, Jimmy. No, I'm sitting here just patiently waiting. I'm trying to work out what took longer, the Titans to find a bit of form or you to arrive this evening. But but both eventually happened. It was a very enjoyable weekend out there at the Top Sport Lounge. The Titans put a few points on, and they'll be looking to finish off the season on a high. But yeah, I completely and wholeheartedly agree. I cannot wait for the finals to roll around. We've still got a little bit of water to go under the bridge this weekend, but then we're going to go into it. There's obviously a Panthers team that are a class above the rest at the moment, but they've had a few players out, and then we've got a lot of teams nipping at their heels that are pretty closely matched, which is going to make for some very, very entertaining footy.
Well, Jimmy, they say a broken clock is right twice a day, and all of a sudden you've struck a little bit of form.
Yeah. Do you want to go straight to the table and we'll do a charity bank balance update?
I think there was a broken clock on his watch as well, Gerard.
Yeah, that too, Tristan, that too. And Jimmy, why not? I know you've been itching for 5 days to get into this. You may as well have that moment of glory.
Now, look, there was a little concern. I put my hands up. I did arrive a little late today. There was some sort of fine system that was looking at being imposed around lunches, which would have brought me right back to about 7 in front of Gerard. And that is the scoreline, actually. I'm at +6. Gerard at -1. Somehow he's got this percentage thing in there that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, I didn't update that just to see if you were actually watching, Jimmy.
Tristan, I don't think got involved in the lunch bets over the course of the weekend. Stayed out. Wise to do so as well. He's still at -12, so not a factor come final series. But
that was the best weekend of my lunch bet season.
Well done. Break even lunch bet weekend. So well done on that. So as a result of that, you've had to put more money into the Pass It On clothing charity. Gerard, where are we at now with our totals? Tristan?
Yeah, we've got a nice little balance that we're ticking along at the moment, and we've got it up to 12,460. So certainly ticking along very, very nicely.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, how'd our bets go last week? Well, you and I went head-to-head on that one, Gerard, the unders 42.5. Tristan, the -29.5. Now, the fascination around the final minute of that game, I can leave to everyone's imagination, but maybe you're prepared to talk more openly about it.
Yes, well, I was watching it in the pub actually with my kids. We took them out there and they had it on mute, and I had all but given up hope that there was going to be a late try when I was watching the replay. So it was shock and excitement from our end when the try was awarded. But yes, it was a very interesting call, and but then unfortunately, the back end of my multi was the Sharks -22.5, which was never ever likely.
What a week, Jimmy. We see the Panthers all of a sudden go a 12-point move last week to -29.5 in a game, to this week all of a sudden an absolute swing the opposite way to now be -9.5 into a game in North Queensland. I mean, we're talking 40-point turnarounds at the handicap in a week?
Must say, you must give the bookies a pat on their back. Like, I don't know if there's anyone here that would help set those odds, but to get a market of 30 points to the side of both the line and the totals on the last play of the game, it was a very efficient market that was set at the end, which hasn't been occurring too often over the course of the season.
Just on those Penrith swings, Gerard, imagine being privy to information that the market's not aware of early. I mean, just can you imagine that? What impact that might have? Just incredible, isn't it?
Be a great advantage, wouldn't it, Jimmy?
Significant advantage, I would have said. Taylor May, anytime, yes. Stephen Crichton, anytime, yes. Isaac Pungo got a little bit quiet out there on that left-hand side, so that's where my multi fell over. So the 3 anytime try scorers. So beyond that, we've still got some great money that has been raised. It's a sellout. We've already got emails from Desperate punters wanting to come to the lunch, of course, Friday, the 9th of September at Dick's Hotel. James Graham, the special guest speaker. Money's raised going for Pass It On clothing, all sorts of celebrities and C grade and D grade and everything else in between coming to the luncheon. So we're excited about that. What we're not so excited about, gents, and we might start there, Tristan, just before we get into game-by-game play and have a look at the futures market and what could play out after this weekend into the semi-finals. The on-field action, like there was a lot of talk about the Storm Roosters game. Incredible game of football, amazing contest, but just some incidents where it looks like the match review committee are not enforcing what they should, Tristan, and it's just leaving a bit of a sour taste and leaving themselves open to criticism here for the NRL.
Yeah, I agree. Like there was blatant for everyone to see with the Nelson Solomona situation that, you know, how he gets off unpunished for that scenario is you just shake your head at it. And I guess obviously we're all invested in this game and in this sport, but as a fan, you watch that and you watch a game of the absolute highest quality like we saw on Friday, and the discussion just needs to be on Saturday about the game and the quality of the game. Sunday it needs to be about the discussion about the quality of the game, and it's not. When you get these glaring oversights happen like that, and there just needs to be a change, because you don't want to have a semi-final marred by that. And when you get a game of that quality, and there are other people that obviously in that game walked over the line and they were punished or they were put on report, and at least, you know, it's just a frustrating point of view. And Jared, I'm sure you've got a bit more to add on it.
Oh, utterly farcical, and some of the justification and smother that came out on Monday morning's press conference was just even more embarrassing than what unfolded. And let me make this point, guys. Last Sunday, I was having lunch within 100 metres of the Gabba in Brisbane. There was a AFL women's game on, and as we sat there having lunch for the hour or so leading up to the start of that game, a throng of people are just walking by, and 90% of them were female, all wearing Brisbane Lions jumpers, going to watch Brisbane women's AFL in that competition. Those ladies, those mothers are having such an influence about where their kids play, in particular the young guys, you know, in their 10s and, you know, 12 and 14 and 17 and 18. And you see that rubbish last weekend that is not being adjudicated. It is not healthy for the game, and it's not healthy for the next 5 years.
And the thing that Graham Annesley said was, well, it's well within the, you know, one of the strengths of the judiciary prior to this year was the fact that there was loading for prior similar and non-similar offences, right? If you're a repeat offender, it actually just came out mathematically. It wasn't a personal opinion, it was mathematically. Okay, you've had 2 prior similars or 2 prior non-similars, and that had that compounding effect. They've taken that away this year, and it's now up to the match review committee to apply that same situation. So you're putting it in the hands of humans who have different opinions to other people, which seem obvious to us, and that's what we're not getting from the match review committee. So in essence, they had a good system that needed tweaking. They threw the baby out with the bathwater, and now we're seeing the situation where Nelson Solomon, Cameron Munster got a letter, not from the Queen for turning 100, but for elbowing Sam Walker in the head.
And Jimmy, if we go back 12 months ago, can you imagine the points and loading that would have been for Munster for that incident? And then to hear last Monday statements like it's in the eye of the beholder. I mean, these are the guys that are actually managing the game and where we're supposed to be going. Yeah. Just incredible.
All right, so that's part of the on-field action. Can you talk, Tristan, about futures markets, table implications, who plays? You know, it's so fascinating. Jared and I were talking on radio today about it. If the Eels win on Thursday night, they're 4th, they trouble Penrith. If the Eels lose and the Roosters win, they play the Rabbitohs 6v7, and the Rabbitohs will flog them. That's the type of competition we've got at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And the markets probably a little bit different. Like the interesting thing about this is that those markets have been as fascinating for this permutations for a long time now. With the futures markets, we actually haven't got a top 4 market up at the moment because it's just purely who wins this game between the Eels and the Storm. So that's effectively the top 4 market, which we'll get into when we discuss that game, but it's virtually pick 'em at the moment. And then, as you say, if the Eels win, they take on Penrith at Penrith when they're probably a little bit lacking in game fitness. They got a Cleary coming back that hasn't played for ages. The Eels have beaten the Panthers already twice this year. They'll be massively up for that derby. And then, as you say, if they lose, they could play either the Roosters or the Rabbitohs, and they're in a lot of trouble against either one of those sides, you know, in a knockout contest. So it's fascinating. The Storm, on the other hand, if they win, they go on and they take on Penrith. Do they get a bit of a free hit to throw everything at the Panthers there to say, well, we can come at them. If we win, we get a week off in game 3 in Melbourne. Or if they lose, they definitely take on either Canberra or the Broncos, who they'd very much fancy their chances. But in saying that, the Raiders beat them down there in Melbourne only 6 or 8 weeks ago. So it's a fascinating contest, and that Roosters-Rabbitohs one in particular is also another one which has massive implications based on the Eels-Storm game, because if the Eels win, the Storm are locked in 5th, and the Roosters and Rabbitohs cannot move out of 6th and 7th spot. So you have to be wary then if there's going to be a couple of late changes, because then these two teams play each other in week 1 of the finals. So will they want to keep a couple of aces up their sleeve? It's their first game in a new stadium as well. Will they want to get a win to christen that surface too? So there's so many permutations here, which just makes it a fascinating couple of days.
Well, then, on the back of that, it's just been an absolute nightmare for me to try and handicap these games, let alone be the bookmaker trying to set the markets this week. And we've seen already some really substantial swings in a couple of games. I mean, clearly the one in North Queensland where, you know, last Sunday, the Cowboys were -6.5. Well, as of today, they're -19.5. We've seen a move already on the Thursday night game. We've seen moves between the Rabbits and the Roosters about who's in, who's out. And as Tristan says, if 4th and 5th are then decided, then, you know, those two guys are going around for practice and could well play each other the following week. So I think the Raiders do end up in 8th. I think the Broncos possibly win over the weekend, but then are sitting back watching what's unfolded in the last couple of weeks. It costs them a final spot. Trying to rate all of this, trying to understand what these final team lists may be, just a nightmare this week.
Yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because depending on what happens there, if the Eels do win, right, the Storm are there, the Roosters and the Rabbitohs are playing to see where they play.
Yes.
Right? And if you speak to Blake Solly, the CEO, he probably thinks, well, Allianz is our home ground. So, you know, they wouldn't be upset with that. So, yeah, like we always say with these things, keep an eye on teams an hour before kickoff if you want to be ultra cautious on that. Do you see that activity after those team lists are announced, Tristan?
Yeah, well, for these games in particular, you know, and we don't like doing it, but we have to, for certain games like the Penrith game last night, we were wary when the team's going to drop. We just popped our markets down for 5 or 10 minutes just to assess what's happening. So we'll suspend the games for 5 minutes when the teams are due to drop, because when there's potential for big movements one way or the other, we have to, you know, make an assessment on where we move that market. And it's a really tricky situation, particularly that Roosters Rabbitohs game. And we'll actually suspend the game whilst the Storm Eels game is in play, because I think that's going to have a massive impact on what's actually going to transpire on Friday night. So this round in particular is always one that you've just got to watch. You've also got to, I suppose, in the Dragons Broncos game, if the Dragons happen to cause an upset against the Broncos, I'd suggest the Tigers might represent a bit of value in the Canberra game as well. So there's all these things looking ahead, trying to assess what's going to be the flow-on effects from any of the earlier games and any of the announcements.
There was a bit of an article yesterday from Adam Pengilly, who's a very good journalist of the Sydney Morning Herald, talking about all the games being on at the same time, a la English Premier League, which is first past the post, and they have relegation, and a little bit like NFL Red Zone. Thoughts on that, gents? In favour or against, Tristan?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. I think it adds an element of fairness to it. But the AFL, we had the last round of the season there 2 weeks ago, and there was nothing more exciting than seeing what the percentage was doing between the Western Bulldogs and Carlton and Collingwood and what the teams needed to win by to get into the finals. The Titans last year needed to win by a margin to get in against the Warriors. So it adds a bit of theatre. Whether it's the fairest option, it isn't, because you give an advantage. I don't think it's going to matter this year, but if, for argument's sake, the Raiders needed to win by 30, they know what they're chasing in that last game of the season, where the Broncos haven't got that liberty, but it adds pressure to them as well. So I like it the way it is, because I think it adds an extra bit of theatre to the last round of the season.
I love it, but we would never see it when we only have 8 games and possibly 9 games next year, because the media rights and the TV channels would just not allow that. But Jimmy, what I would love to see is that the final schedule for the last round is done 10 days prior, and that one round is saved until the latest possible date to schedule the games. And clearly there's going to be some implications around what grounds are available, because you'd love to see on Sunday afternoon the Broncos playing the Dragons, followed by the Raiders playing the Tigers, and that's the playoff for who ends up 8th. And then Saturday night having the Eels and the Storm and the Rabbits and the Roosters, with the implications around who ends up in 4th, 5th and 6th.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because rugby league wanted to be your first sport at the new Allianz Stadium. The next night, the Wallabies are playing South Africa. So, that's the scheduling issue that they have. And if you go, we'll make it Sunday, well, then you're not the first sport there, which is sort of a feather in your cap. But, it was an interesting talking point, no doubt. All right, let's get into the games. Round 25. First up, it's a beauty. It's important. Eels v Storm, Combank Stadium. Regan Campbell-Gillard, guilty at the judiciary, free to play. So that the 1 through 17 is the same as that squad that absolutely flogged Brisbane last week. For the Storm, Felice Kafusi back into the starting side. Tui Kamikamica to the bench. Josh King named at lock. Brandon Smith on the interchange. That may or may not change. There is all sorts of rumour around who's playing in this one, Tristan, which I guess from your point of view needs to be addressed.
Yeah, this is a nightmare with all those rumours flying around. I think we're going to have a bit more of an idea probably by the time everyone listens to this, once the last couple of players or there's only 19 left in that team list. So at the moment, there's been a strong push for the Eels. They've been back from $2.30 into $1.90. So they're slight favourites now. The Storm's gone from $1.60 odd out to $1.93, and the line's gone from 3.5 to pick 'em. So we'll know a bit more what that looks like if there's any changes to the team over the next bit. I think from an analytical point of view, I think you've got to work out, were the Eels that good or were the Broncos that bad last week? And I think that was the question we had to ask ourselves in the Roosters Storm game last weekend. And the Roosters got over the line and beat the Storm after they absolutely put the Broncos to the cleaners. So it's going to be interesting, the form line. There's obviously a lot still to come in terms of who's actually lining up and starting, but it's a massively important game for particularly the Eels. They'd love to finish 4th.
I have no doubt that there's going to be team changes here. I'm not sure what they all are. I do think there's team changes for both teams. There was plenty of mail going into that game last week for the Storm Roosters lineup, that there were a few guys who may have been late question marks for the Storm who are a little bit busted. I'm sure coming out of what was a very tough physical game, that question now remains and is probably amplified a little into this week. And where does either team, but in particular the Storm, draw the line about who they want to play this week? And yes, it'd be great to get 4th spot, but you're not playing at home. Whereas if they end up in 5th spot, they then do have a home game next week, and we know that that's a significant advantage. But there's also speculation around 1 or 2 players for the Eels, potentially a back rower there. So I think the cut down to 19 tonight will be very interesting. Then we have the matchup between these two clubs, where the Eels, in particular, Brad Arthur, has a very good record when they play the Storm. And, they've won 4 of the last 7. They won back in round 3 down in Melbourne. And Arthur just seems to love coming up against his old coach in Bellamy. And through the middle and the forwards, and if there are a few of those key changes, and at home, I'm sure we've got a big crowd. Listen, I found the game very difficult to split. I thought earlier in the week, the +3.5 for the Eels just looked a little bit too generous to mine. I'm with the Eels, potentially an upset, but now we're about $1.90 each. Pick 'em. The 3.5 looked an advantage. That's all gone. Slightly to the Eels. Big watch on final teams, and then who ends up playing 4th.
I think last week with that Roosters Storm game, which was such a, maybe not great football, but a great contest, incredible contest. The physicality of the contest was amazing, but it reinforced to me the best defensive teams win grand finals. And if you look at the semi-final last year, semi-final series, by the time we got to the second week of the semi-final series, so the best 6 teams or less, it was the best 6 defensive sides. And those games that came out of that were defence-oriented, and they were ferocious contests. And that's sort of what we had on Friday night. So it just showed that the Roosters have a defence that can nullify a Munster and a Hughes and a Grant, which is unusual, right? Not all sides can do that. I think the Eels have a defence that can do something similar as well. I don't see this as a high-scoring game. I think really defence-oriented again. I liked what Parramatta did against the Broncos. I'll say it was Mitch Moses, one of his best performances. And you talk about that, just going straight at the line, not sideways, makes everyone around him dangerous, makes him dangerous as a ball runner. And you talked about the back rowers, Jared, and I don't know which ones it is, but if it's Sean Lane, well, he has been amazing on that left edge. So Dylan Brown's benefiting from that. The whole Clint Gutherson is benefiting from it. He's just been superb and put his name up in lights for a kangaroo tour for the Rugby League World Cup, which would be amazing. I think Parramatta at home, with it all to play for, pending those changes for the Melbourne Storm too, which we'll have to wait and see. But a toss of the coin game, I go the home team, the Parramatta Eels. Okay, first game on Friday night. Bulldogs v the Sea Eagles. They're getting ready for it'd be Mad Monday come early, won't it? Luke Thompson named in the reserves after missing that Sharks game with COVID. He'd love to be back there for the final game of the year. Corey Waddell returning from that 5-week suspension. So he's been listed in the second row. KO Weeks moves into the starting side at fullback. Tolatau Kola back into the centres. Ben Trbojevic to the bench. Andrew Davey and Dylan Walker in the starting pack. Again, I suppose you have to wait and see to what Desi Hasler does with this one, but probably one of the more straightforward ones to price up, Tristan.
Yeah, it is, which is saying something when it's a nothing game and you're trying to predict the care factor of both of these sides. But I think that was pretty obvious for all to see that the Bulldogs really aimed up against the Sharks. They obviously couldn't put any points on, but they defended stoutly, and I think they show they've got a lot of pride in their jersey. I think they want to send off Mick Potter. Well, you could not be further from that mentality with Manly at the moment. They have been absolutely horrid since the Titans took all of their confidence away about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But the Bulldogs are $1.48, Manly $2.70, 6.5 is the line, 53.5 the total points. If these two teams play with the mentality they played with last weekend, the Bulldogs, in my opinion, win very, very comfortably.
Who would have thought coming into the last round, the Bulldogs -6.5 favourites? My goodness, what a roll, all downhill, and an utter mess the Eagles have now become. They've been on Mad Monday for 6 weeks. They'll now face, I think, their 7th loss to finish the season. There is speculation I'm hearing that Croker may be a late out, possibly another one for the Eagles. That would mean that there's somewhere around 10 to 11 players sitting on the sideline watching this game. And clearly they have not given a flying you-know-what for the last number of weeks. I'm with the Bulldogs. Listen, 2 good friends of mine who've got a fair idea have been saying for the last couple of days, Bulldogs 13 plus here, take your pick. I think they win. I can't touch the Bulldogs at -6.5. I think it's probably about right. I just think that maybe that's a little bit too generous and a bad price about a team that really hasn't been that good. But dear, oh dear, the Eagles are a mess. And Tristan, I'll be all eyes when the early markets for next season come out for the Eagles to not only miss the top 8, but maybe somewhere down the bottom of the table next season. I think they have an enormous amount of work to do to pull this all together. And I've got no doubt next year is Mr. Hasler's last.
What if Tommy T's available for all 24 games?
I'm happy to be against them.
happy to be against that almost, aren't you? Like, unfortunately, that's the way it is. It's really the Broncos, the Dragons barbecue gate, isn't it? Ever since the Pride jersey, they haven't won a game. They haven't looked like it. At different stages, they've looked disinterested. You know, it was probably more than a training run for the Raiders last week, but just scoring some really fantastic tries, exciting tries, but the tries you score when you realise, well, I'm not getting bruised by the opposition, so we're going to try and put this on. And it all came off for them at the time. The Bulldogs, as you say, there was effort there. There's been effort for most of the time. It's been a young squad that's just sort of got to the end and have been looking for it for a little bit. But there's still plenty of players there playing for next year, playing for beyond that as well, too. I think Gus Gould was talking about who's there and who's not there and putting positions vacant, signs up for all to see in certain positions. So it'll be an interesting one. I think the effort comes from the Bulldogs, not from Manly. And I'm happy to take the Bulldogs at the -6.5. Okay, we've talked a lot about it. There's a $900 million stadium and it's not the star attraction. So first game at Allianz, the Roosters and the Rabbitohs. Victor Radley, no. Daniel Tupou, no. Lindsay Collins, no, for all different reasons. So Yasiwa Torkiaho comes in at lock. That's a great move. I love that. Romorovski into the starting side. Fletcher Baker, Terrell May, the new faces on the bench there. For the Rabbitohs, no Damien Cook, sidelined by COVID. Saliva Havili fills in again. Latrell Mitchell. Now, he was up on the farm on Monday. Apparently, he's back Tuesday. So the Ferrari will be right to go on Friday night. No Campbell Graham. He's a loss. Jackson Polo comes in to replace him. This is one of the games of the season. Tristan?
Hopefully it's one of the games of the season. Hopefully we don't get any late withdrawals and hopefully it means something. But it will mean something because they're big rivals. But I just do caution this because if these two teams are going to play each other next week, I do have a feeling that their coaches are both wily enough to keep a little bit of ammo up their sleeve. So that's the one thing to be mindful of. This market is flung around massively. We opened at $1.67, the Roosters, $2.20, the Bunnies, 2.5. The Bunnies actually got into favourite, $1.82, and now it's back to $1.77, the Roosters, $2.08, the Rabbitohs, and 1.5 the line. It's going to be a cracker if they're all lined up, if they're all 100%, but we know the main event is likely going to be next week.
And on the back of that, Tristan, knowing the result out of Thursday night and the two long 22-man squad team lists that both teams have named here, both coaches have got stuff that they can juggle around here when they have to cut down to 19 to move guys in or out and rest. And so we already have Cook and Graham out this week for the Rabbitohs. I mean, Cook didn't play last week. Radley won't play. Tupou won't play. Collins is out for a number of weeks. I'm sure that if it's a nothing game, that Robinson also rests another couple. I could throw darts at this either side and absolutely not come up with how I think the game unfolds. I've actually been a bit disappointed with the Rabbits in the last couple of weeks. I know they won last week against the Cowboys, but I thought they got a really nice rub of the green and some nice leg ups into that final result. Jimmy, let's not talk about that last try. The week before, I thought they were pretty disappointing against the Panthers, but they do have this hold mentally and on the park over the Roosters for the last number of years. They've won 6 of the last 8. Some of those have been very resounding wins. But if all of a sudden it looks like they're going to play each other the following week, I'm just not sure that everybody's going full tilt. I went with the Roosters. They've won their last 7. I like what they're doing through the middle. But the key to this game is, does it really matter when it comes to game time?
Oh, the -6.5, never in doubt last week. Jared, go Tommy Burgess. Go Tommy Burgess. You know what? South Sydney looked to me like, oh, yeah, we've got another level that we'll go to when we need it. Yeah, we've got another level when we can go to that when we need it. And if you start doing that too much, just when you need it, you can't get there. So this is not the game where they'll need it. This is a game I think the Roosters win. For me, I think it's really interesting the way the Roosters play without Radley. So he's such an important part of, defensively, yeah, we know his aggression and that's how he got himself into trouble with getting knocked out. But even just what he brings to the side when he just grabs Nelson by the throat, there's this little guy grabbing big Nelson, and that sends a really strong message to the rest of the team, come follow me because look what I'm prepared to do. But I'm more interested in his ball playing and how important he is for that. Keary on the left and Walker on the right, and the way they've settled into those roles. Torquiaho can't do that. That's not his game. So it'd be interesting to see what Trent Robinson does this week with that style of play. And you're exactly right about the hold mentally that South Sydney have over two sides, the Eels and the Roosters. The Roosters have got to shake it, because not only is it going to be important come next week potentially, but it's that whole mentality around our arch rivals and our ancient foe. And the South fans revel in it. South Sydney would revel in it. They need to be able to break that. The Roosters, I think they can. I'll take them at the -1.5. All right, Saturday, Warriors v the Titans. There we go. Look at that. There we go. The Top Sport. I'm sure there's people all around the streets of the Gold Coast and Rabina wearing their Titans polo shirt. The Warriors, they've got a few players back. Sean Johnson is back. Ewan Aitken is back. Jesse Arthurs, Wade Egan, Marcelo Montoya and Rocco Berry all back, named to return. For the Titans, Philip Sammy is back after missing round 24, and Cleese Haas is expected to play off the bench. How you go? Come on, keep them tight, your Top Sport Titans, Tristan.
Yes, well, I think the obvious mentality here is the Titans had their win and they've won at home, and now they're travelling over to New Zealand. And the Warriors will try to finish off the season on a high, but that might be what happens. But I just feel the way they finished the season, they played some entertaining football. They were very exciting, and I just feel this is going to be very much a game of touch footy. It's the highest totals line we've got this season, 57.5, and I just think the way AJ Brimson was playing, I think there's going to be a lot of points, and I think the Titans might get their fair share of it. It's $1.55 the Warriors, $2.50 the Titans, 5.5 the line, 57.5. I'm going to be very optimistic for a high-scoring, entertaining Titans win, but I think whatever happens, we're going to see lots and lots and lots of points.
Well, this looks like Mad Monday for 4 days leading into the game, doesn't it? I mean, the thing about the Titans, they've won 2 of their last 3, which then gets them off the bottom of the table. So they've escaped the spoon. The pressure's off. They come off that game last weekend where, they're in a 62-point game. They win by a margin. Everybody's walking out of there, patting each other on the back. They've won those last 2 of the last 3. They now travel across the ditch. It's the last game of the season. Nothing matters now. We've avoided the spoon. Everybody's on holiday. I mean, what could possibly go wrong here? I mean, the one thing that will be optional will be defence. And that's why that total points now is 57.5. I'm not sure it gets there, but I'm certainly not betting against it. I'd love to be all over the Titans at +5.5 if I had an inkling that they were half serious about this. But it's that last game that leads into the season, and it's all over. We're a bit relaxed here. Listen, I'm tipping the Titans. Yeah, the Warriors, I just don't know who turns up for the Warriors. They've been very good at home over the last 6 weeks. A couple of weeks ago, they played the Bulldogs at home, where the Bulldogs didn't care. And again, the Bulldogs looked like they were on holidays, and the Warriors, lo and behold, can rack up 42 points. I think for them, there's a little bit of a statement about playing their last game at home. It's a sellout. Their sponsors gone and bought all the tickets and handed them out that were left last Tuesday. So a lot of crowd support. I'm with the Titans. I absolutely do not trust the game.
Strong speculation that Sean Johnson will actually run out in a dinner suit just to prove a point. Engagements and tackles. I'd like to keep a close eye on that.
Actually, strong male, Jimmy. He's a big fan of you and listening to you talk about him on the podcast. Yeah,
no, I'm sure he is. I've got nothing but the utmost respect for Sean Johnson and the career that he's had. It's just that, we get to a time in our career where, what did Gus Gould used to say? You lose all desire for physical contact. And I think that's happened to Sean about 18 months ago. So one of the great players in New Zealand's rugby league history, but unfortunately he's not at that now. But that doesn't mean he can't have 3 try assists and a try against the Gold Coast Titans. So for all those reasons explained, I would love to know whether the Titans are having Mad Monday in Queenstown. That would give me further insight into how they're approaching this game. I just don't know. I love the over 57.5. I want to back Titans +5.5, but I can't do it. Stay out. It's a Warriors game. Back out. All right, let's get to second game on a Saturday. This is an interesting one. Dragons v Broncos, the 92-93 grand final revisited 30 years later. Unfortunately, it's out of the 8th game at Netstrata Jubilee. Same 17 for Anthony Griffin that got the job done against the West Tigers. Andrew McCulloch listed amongst the reserves. So interesting to see what I've seen that before in my time too, that for the retiring player, they get a last game when perhaps they shouldn't. So stand by for that, Jaden Hunt. Broncos, Adam Reynolds has been named. He had that head knock last week. Have to see whether he does play. Ezra Mam, I don't know what's going on here. Tyson Gamble has replaced him, even though reports today that Tyson Gamble was going to go to the Newcastle Knights. Tom Flegler and Selwyn Cobbo both named and expected to play. This is an interesting one, Tristan.
An interesting one, and what's been very interesting is the discussion over whether or not Kevy gave the boys a spray or not. That's been very, very topical. It was, it's certainly added a layer of intrigue to this contest. The Broncos have been absolutely woeful the last 4 weeks. They've undone a hell of a lot of good work, and I know the Dragons will want nothing more than to knock the Broncos out of any chance of making the 8. I don't think they can make the 8 anyway, but if they get a win here, you never know what Canberra can toss up in the last game of the season. $2.40 the Dragons, $1.57 the Broncos, 4.5 the line. There has been a move, 3.5 out to 4.5, but at that 4.5 we have laid the Dragons. So 51.5 the total points. Defense again, the Broncos were leaky at points. The Dragons, however, they couldn't put too many on the Tigers. They're probably lucky to get a result there. So whether they can contribute to this scoreline, time will tell. But 4.5 is the line. Broncos favourites at the moment.
And what a basket case of a game. Who's trying? What does really matter? Yes, the Broncos are playing for potentially saving their skin and maybe ending up 8th. Well, I don't think they will. I think they probably win because I think they probably push the football around. Some of the changes, like you, Jimmy, I just don't understand what the hell's going on. I mean, Ezra Mann has been one of the finds of the season for the Broncos, and the kid is now on the extended bench. Tyson Gamble, I'm sorry, he's not a starting 7-6, or he's not even a starting 14 for mine, yet he's going to start the game in what looks a game that they need a critical win. I think the Broncos have got to throw everything at this in terms of ball movement. I mean, we know their defence is going to be leaking here. They've got to play with tempo and ball shift, get some points going, get some confidence, and then try and get themselves into a game where they can finally win. It doesn't matter for mine. Then we take the Dragons. I mean, all the noises I've been saying for weeks coming out of there have been horrible. There's now the news about Jaden Sewer. He requested a release about 6 weeks ago. It's now only just got out. I know of at least 2 other players who have now also requested releases. All the mail that's been going on for about 10 weeks about the camp being unhappy, and in particular unhappy with the coach, is accurate. They keep plodding away up and down in the last couple of weeks. They should have flogged the Tigers off the back of their form leading into that game last week. Yet the way the game unfolded, they should have been beat by 6 or 8. They should never have got away with that late win, but for some really dumb football from the Tigers. They're at home. Maybe that's an advantage. Broncos on the road. Broncos now leaking points like a sieve. With the Broncos, because maybe they got something to play for, absolutely can't stand the game.
I like the Dragons plus 4.5 at home. Ben Hunt couldn't play as poorly as he did last week, and very lucky to get out of that game. I find it really interesting. Like, I like Zach Lomax, Tamora boy, and we know he's a nice kid. But I'm sure that they've been talking to him for about 18 months about putting away the flick pass, right? So he puts away the flick pass, and his next trick is the no-look pass for the try assist. I mean, that's just frustrating from a coaching point of view. Carrigan's back. I see that as a positive for the Broncos. I can't understand Ezra Mam. I just can't. The only thing I can think there, boys, is he's turned up late for training, or as one listener speculated this week, was he the guy that took offence at the blow-up from Kevy Walters? So, I don't know, but clearly been one of their best over the last, probably the year, but certainly the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I agree with you. Tyson Gamble, his effort's good. Maybe he's at training first with an apple every day, but I just don't see him as being a threat. And I don't know what Newcastle are doing buying him, but, if they can't find a kid in the Hunter that can do what Tyson Gamble can do, then they have got massive issues with their pathways, the Newcastle Knights.
Well, young Clifford, with his head right, would eat Gamble every week. Yet he's now being offered up for trade after just his first season at the Knights. We'll get to them in a moment. Jimmy, the other thing that's very interesting, I have on very good authority this week, that Payne Haas will be released in the off-season and end up at another club.
Is that around team performance as much as it is about what he's getting paid?
It's all about the coin.
All about the coin. Okay.
All about the coin. And the Broncos have just decided it's all too hard. Payne Haas and his manager have just decided we're not going to get what I want for the rest of my career, the rest of my contract at this club. And I believe that both have basically come to an agreement that in the off-season, it'll all finish and Payne Haas will be elsewhere next year. And I suspect that a Sydney club, and there's a couple of them lining up.
Does that mean that if he goes to a successful club, he doesn't want as much coin? Or does he want the coin no matter where he goes?
It's the coin first.
Okay. So you never know what the situation is within the Polynesian families too. Like I'd say Payne is probably a provider for that whole family, which is often the case. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It just is. So yeah, interesting. That Anthony Seibold talks about the number of missed tackles. So what's that come to? It's lack of intent in defence. It's not like they can't defend. It's like they won't defend. There's a big difference. And that's what we've seen from the Broncos over the last couple of weeks. All right, let's get into the game. Oh, good luck, Tristan. Cowboys up against the Panthers. Tommy Dearden is listed amongst the reserves. He's had surgery on that ruptured testicle. That means Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow will drop back to the bench if he does come in. So I don't think we've got time to go through the players from the Penrith Panthers who have been left out. So Coruscant, To'o, Edwards, Yeo, Tongo, Fisher-Harris, Luai, Leota, Lenu, Crichton, May, Kikau, Cleary not playing. Good luck, Tristan.
Yes, so we opened this market at 12.5. When I had a quick little look forward there late last week, the Panthers were favourites in some places, which I wouldn't like to see the look of those books at the moment because it's $1.11 the Cowboys, $6.70 the Panthers, and 19.5. So we've moved it by 7 points. Even though we were of the opinion, and it was to everyone's credit, and I think this is from our perspective and people having a bet, because the last thing you want is for punters to be on the Panthers at a terrible price as well. But it's been very, very well known that the Panthers were going to rest a large chunk of their players for this game, which is great from all perspectives. How you actually price the game, who knows? And I'll tell you what, guys, the one thing I'm worried about is pricing up the New South Wales Cup game between the Panthers side when they take the field there this weekend, because that is going to be an absolute pin the tail on the donkey job. But 19.5 the line, 185 the Cowboys, 195 the Panthers. This is a little bit like the Panthers-Warriors game last week when it moved out a mile. Now, the only difference here is that these guys are coming into a very successful structure. They're coming from a good New South Wales Cup side. They're going to have that intent to try to put up a good performance here. You know, are they going to turn it up like some of these big lines we've seen? I probably don't think so, but are they going to be good enough? And the Cowboys are obviously wanting to send a message. They want to jump the Sharks to get back into the second spot, but for and against isn't really an issue there. It's more so they just need to get a win. So it's a very, very tricky one to price up, at 19.5 is where we have it.
Well, let's start at the end first, Tristan and Jimmy. Are we either with or against plus 19.5 being enough?
Not enough.
Not enough, Tristan?
No.
I think it's going to continue to shift out, but I would rather be with a plus at game time.
And would you like to start a lunch bet at that position?
Yes.
Jimmy?
I'm at the minus 19.5 Cowboys.
Okay. Well, Tristan and I are certainly already engaged. I don't think it's enough. I think Payton's intent is that he's full tilt here. He will go with, and he's already named a very strong list. It's a long trip to North Queensland. They'll have a good crowd. I think he wants to get his game right into these coming weeks. I think they win. I think they cover 9.5. I do agree with Tristan. I think by game time, it's probably longer. I just don't think it's enough. it's really hard to pin a number around it, but I just think, a top 2 or 3 team running out against a list that is a New South Wales Cup team is just not going to be close. Yes, it's a good system, and yes, in a couple of lower games of recent weeks, they've defended well, but this is completely different gravy here. I'm all over the Cowboys. I think even at 19.5, they cover the line. I think they win comfortably, but then it's all about the semi-finals for both teams.
Yeah, I'll show you guys something. I'm a bit of paper here. One game not to get involved in lunch bets, and that's the Panthers Cowboys game, and here we are.
Well, that's why I started at the end and worked backwards, because I just wanted to see who might be either side of that position.
As my children keep telling me, Tristan, rules are made to be broken, right? So, a big shout out too from Jason Taylor, the former teammate of Ivan Cleary, whose North Sydney Bears take on the Penrith Panthers in the New South Wales Knock-On Effect Cup. So dramatically weakened the Penrith Panthers side, it must be said. Do we anticipate the Cowboys resting anyone? Is it in their benefit if they go, look, the Sharks are going to beat the Knights? I think we'll all tip that come next game. So we can't improve our position. We're going to have to go to Sydney anyway. So why don't we just go out there and not, rest a couple of players that might need it.
I'm sure he may well do that, Jimmy. But I looked and pulled apart what he's named. Firstly, from 14 to 17, and then from 18 to 22. And listen, I don't expect Dearden plays this week, but guys like Brendan Elliott, Ben Condon, a couple of other guys there, they've all been very good in first grade over the last 18 months. So it's certainly a very strong top list. And I'm sure for most of at least the first 50 or 60 minutes, Peyton's all about how they play.
All right. I'll answer me this one then. If they said, righto, Drinkwater, Townsend, and Taumalolo, we're only resting 3. How are you going there with your minus 19.5?
Well, I'm already in, aren't I?
Yeah, fair enough. That's the concern with these games, and it's we're looking at it from a frustrated tipster's point of view, not from the lens of a bookmaker, which is even more challenging. So totally understand why Ivan's doing it. I do note that they're still chartering the plane. In my mind, I'm Brian Fletcher, the CEO of the Panthers, going, well, hang on, why are you chartering it? Who cares how these blokes come back? We've already got the fresh 13 that are still here for their first game next week.
Well, I think one of the reasons Brian Fletcher's blown up this week about what they pick up for the minor premiership is he looked at the invoice that came through for the cost of the flight.
Well, the other thing is too, apparently went around the clubs and they all agreed that prize money was too low. Did we get the vote from the West Tigers? What was their thoughts on the prize money for minor premiership and winning the competition? Anyway.
I think that's all tied up in the $78 million new performance of excellence, is it?
Yes, Centre of Excellence. That's it, the Centre of Excellence. I'm despite all that, I'm still with the Cowboys at the minus 19 as it stands. Knights Sharks, we mentioned it Sunday, McDonald Jones Stadium. Milford out with a rib injury. Phoenix Crossland starting at 5'8". Chris Randall onto the bench alongside Jack Johns. Matt Croker moving into the starting side. Tuasa Sue drops out to the reserves. Dale Finucane listed in the reserves. He's got the rib cartilage injury from last week. So, again, it's all interest around what happens with the Sharks team list an hour out before the game. So not making your job any easier for this one either, Tristan.
No, and the Sharks are likely going to need to win this game to cement themselves in second, but the margin's not going to matter. So whether that means they play a more conservative style of footy just to try to get the 2 points. We saw they couldn't really put a Bulldog side of the sword, and we saw the Knights really aimed up last game at home against the Raiders, although they couldn't follow through with it in the second half. And then when they take on a Titan side away from home, when there's a send-off, they couldn't get the job done. So it just makes it so hard to work out where this line should be. We're $1.12 Cronulla, $6.25 the Knights, 18.5. Line's already moved 16.5, out to 18.5 and 53.5 for total points. Absolute lottery.
It is. I honestly think 8.5 is probably right, and maybe it should be higher. I do think, though, looking at that extended list that the Sharks end up by game time or the 24 hours prior, resting a few guys this week, because Some of the lineup there suggests to me players that can probably cover key roles, in particular a couple of forwards and a couple in that spine. The Sharks just need 2 points, get on with the weekend, don't get any major injuries. The Knights firstly have been absolutely horrible this season, and at home, just a disaster. They won 2 of 11. It's their last game. I think traditionally their last home game is their Old Boys weekend, which in the past they've lifted for. Well, they haven't lifted for anything this season. Sharks win. Just stay right away from the game. And I think for the Sharks, they just don't want any injuries. Finish up in second spot. Amazing, and credit to the coach what they've done this season to get there. Then they move into the finals.
And the other thing about this, you can see this being a game where they're 16 points up with 20 minutes to play, and you say, righto, Nico, come and have a spell. Like even if they're named to play, and they do, and it's about looking after that. You're right, they've been excellent, haven't they, the Sharks? The difference between their best and their worst performance, like it's such a narrow gap, which is a really good sign. And it's classic Fitzgibbon, isn't it? Like the difference between his best and worst game was bugger all, because he was an all-effort player. And that's what his Sharks have developed in. They say the team takes on the personality of the coach, and, attention to detail and doing the little things right, and bringing plenty of energy and enthusiasm. That's what they've done. They're going to be rewarded with a home semi-final, which I think is wrong that they played at PointsBet, but such an advantage for them if they do happen to play the Cowboys in that game. The Knights season has been, the Knights want to be thankful for the West Tigers, because otherwise, based on what's happened up there and the fact they're geographically away from the centre of Sydney. But other than that, they've had an incredibly poor season. Horribly disappointing for a really, really loyal fan base. And they want to see some improvement next year. I don't know whether they're going to get it, but and starting with, coach under pressure and $1 million player who needs to be producing on the field, not just for Queensland. So, the Sharks to win and win it pretty comfortably. Final game. Is it an important one for the Raiders? Do they need to win it? Can they get it done? The Tigers, they look like they're well and truly outsiders in this one. I'm just checking that they've got 17 to run around. Oh, hang on. Kenny Marmalore is back on the ding-a-ling. Luke Garner named at centre. James Tarmo returns from that one-game suspension for the Raiders. Nick Kotrich, he's back from a groin injury. Albert Hopewadi goes to 18th man. So that's the only change for the Raiders from a side that was so impressive last week against the Manly Seagulls. This one looks straightforward, Tristan.
It does, and I touched on that. Keep an eye on the Dragons-Broncos game in this one. But normally, if a side were to cause an upset like the Dragons could, and mean that the Raiders are safe inside the top 8, it would potentially mean that the Tigers are a good bet, which I probably still think is that mentality. But the Raiders are one of those sides that you almost feel with a more pressure and an expectation on. This could be a game that they could bottle if they do need to get over and win. And if they've got the shackles off and they can just roll up the score, they might put a number on the Tigers. Who knows? It's $3.80. The Tigers, they were a lot better there last weekend against the Dragons. The Raiders are $1.27. 12.5 is the line. 185 the plus, 195 the minus, 49.5 the total points. And I'll be very happy once this game's finished so we can move into the finals.
Yeah, very interesting, isn't it? If the Broncos happen to play some touch footy and really throw some attack at that game against the Dragons, and not only win, but win comfortably and rack up maybe a 30-point margin, all of a sudden that puts a little bit of salt and pepper on the tail of this game, in particular for the Raiders, because at the moment, the differential between the two of them is 43 points into this weekend. If all of a sudden we took 30 off that and the Raiders have got to win and maintain that differential, you're right, Tristan. If there's one team that could bottle it, it's possibly the Raiders. I like what he's done with his list here. In Stewart, he's clearly named a whole heap of guys that if all of a sudden the Dragons do get beat, he can then all of a sudden swap guys in and out, rest a few for the following week. Look at that Tigers list. I mean, there's a number of guys there. I don't even know anything about their form. They've got so many outs and so many changes. At Leichhardt, I don't know if that helps them. The Raiders win. If there's no pressure, then they probably just get the job done. If there's a little bit, well, they could rack some points up. But certainly the Raiders are winning.
So via that rationale about what the Broncos could potentially do to a dispirited Dragon side, right? Surely you play Ezra Mam. Like if you're going to run some points up, Tyson Gamble's not your man to be running points up. Like Ezra Mam certainly is. But anyway, that just goes back to he must have turned up late. He must have had the wrong signal on at training. I don't know what's going on there, but anyway, he's not playing. The Raiders were superb, throwing the ball around everywhere. As you say, that can stick. They could beat the Tigers by 50, or they get pipped on the post by a late penalty because of a Corey Horsburgh high tackle. Like that's the type of thing that you could actually see here at Leichhardt. A lot of emotion around that. So many people moving on. Tamo probably last game. Brett Kamali last game. Club wins the wooden spoon. Dispiriting for everyone. It'll probably be a glorious day at Leichhardt, the eighth wonder of the world, or so it's called. But as a betting medium, this is a really, really tough one. I just think the Raiders will get it done because they have to get it done. They've got far more to play for. Tarpany he's just superb. He's just been one of the very best this year, and deserves probably I think the Raiders deserve to play finals football more than the Broncos. Do you reckon that's a fair comment?
Well, put it this way, I'd be more excited about potentially a Parramatta Raiders game or a Storm Raiders game than I would with Broncos facing either of those sides, because we saw what the Raiders did to the Storm only 6 weeks ago, and we saw what the Melbourne Storm did to the Broncos at Suncorp only 2 weeks ago.
Well, and potentially into this week, we could end up with the Storm at 5th, the Raiders at the 8th, and that game then down at Amy Park next weekend. That would be an absolute cracker, because we know that the Raiders dusted them up only, 6 or 8 weeks ago when they started this run towards the finals. Answer to your question, Jimmy, yes, I do. I think the Raiders also copped 2 very poor games that they lost late, which if we were to add to where they are now, they'd definitely be in the 8th. So, and the way the Broncos have just completely fallen off a cliff in the last 6 weeks, all over the Raiders, that yes, they should be there.
So what was that one? I know the Warriors won with the late high tackle when Matt Lodge stayed down with the high hit, Corey Horsburgh. What was the other one? Do you recall?
No, I don't off the top of my head, but
anyway, every side sort of got that, but that one with the Warriors stands out.
Well, there's also, wasn't it the Dragons one where there was the late poor call in front of the post?
Yeah, but they squared it up the next game, so that was.
My Titans also gave them a freebie from 20 points up as well.
That's right. Oh dear. Yeah, see, there you go. Swings and roundabouts. All right, Jared, you better give us your tip and your best bet of the week, please, mate.
Well, Jimmy, last week 7 out of 8, and I had the Cowboys going for an absolute bomb and missed it. This week, if I got 4, I'd be very happy, because I just think it's one of those weeks. I'm with the Eels, the Bulldogs, the Roosters, the Titans, the Broncos, the Cowboys, the Sharks, the Raiders. A best bet, dear oh dear. I spent 24 hours getting a migraine trying to come up with this. I've gone with an all up. Let's go with the Bulldogs to win, the Cowboys 13+, and the Raiders to win. So we've got to wait till Sunday afternoon to get the third one home. Those 3 in the all up: Bulldogs win, Cowboys 13.5, Raiders to win, somewhere around $2.90, $2.94. I'll go with that as the best of the week.
Tristan?
Yeah, I'm going to go a double as well. I'm going to take the Bulldogs -6.5, all up my Titans straight off the stick at $4.87. I'm going to throw 100 on that.
Oh, there we go. All right, I'm having a look at my multi as well. I've got the Sharks 13+, and then I've got the same as you, Jared, Cowboys 13+, and the Raiders to win. So I'm looking at $2.72. For that.
$2.72, yes. All
Sharks
locked
13+,
in.
Raiders, Cowboys 13+. I do actually like the Eels Storm under 43.5, but it's a negative bet, so we don't want to we don't want to take away from.
Would you rather lose money positively or win money negatively, Jimmy?
I'll tell you what I'd rather do, Tristan. I'd rather win a double lunch bet negatively with the under.
Yes, we actually have a first, don't we, Jimmy? A double lunch bet, and that will be erased from my history very quickly. And Jimmy, I see that you're now sitting on your hands. I mean, each week here you are peppering away 5 out of 8 games looking for a lunch bet, and this week you're just happy to sit back there nice and relaxed and no action.
Well, nothing presented itself, Gerard. I mean, you know, we're on the same side with the. I don't want to double up poor Tristan. Bloody hell, he's got mouths to feed. You know, keep taking him down there. What did you think? I like the Dragons plus 4.5. Do you want to make that one interesting?
And Broncos giving up 4.5.
Yeah. Remember, Tyson Gamble's back. Very solid defensive player.
No, thank you, Jimmy.
Okay. All right.
I was just going to add a little bit of theatre to that. If Gerard happened to say yes, and then I was going to say I'll jump on your side, Jimmy, would you still want the bet?
Oh, jeez. Tell you what, that's nerve-wracking. Do you want to do that?
Oh, I'm keen. I'm with you. I like the Dragons, but we need Gerard to take part.
No. Listen, the Broncos are leaking 40 a week. I'm not going with them to give up minus 4.5.
All right. Okay. What about the Pros and the Joes? Have we got any market moves there? What do they come? What do the sharp minds come for this week, Tristan?
The sharp minds they've been coming obviously for the Cowboys. That Roosters Rabbitohs game. There's been money all over the shop in that, but like other weeks, we just can't get for these dead rubber games. We can't get the teams to win by 30 plus or to score 30 or score 40 short enough. And games like the Warriors, the Titans, where the total points are 57.5, our model isn't handling them where we need to be. So yeah, we've laid the Warriors to score 30 plus to a lot of sharps, and also as well the Raiders to score 40 plus at a big price. They've been very, very well backed by the sharps there, and a little bit more exotic options.
The three angles that have been in conversations with me over the last couple of days have certainly been about the yields at the 3.5, where the market's moved. Certainly early about wanting to get all over the Cowboys at the shorter lines, which is now out to 9.5. And they've certainly been the two key plays where I think all the interest has been, and certainly laying the storm.
Okay, I tell you what a lot of people have been telling me, and I'm word filtering through, so I'll seek confirmation from you right now, Gerard. But on the back of some of the work of Libby Hopwood, who's been a colleague of mine at Sky Racing, and what she's doing with her OnlyFans page, any truth to the rumour that you might be starting up your own OnlyFans page with some sort of dress to impress type situation with your tips in coming seasons?
Well, Jimmy, the one thing that Libby does have an advantage over me here is, she probably has two things that might be a key advantage. And in answer to the question, Jimmy, no.
Right.
We would like people to listen and enjoy, and certainly I think me taking up that option would tip cold water all over that.
All right. Hey, what about a racing tip this week, mate?
Jimmy, let's go to Randwick Race 8, number 14, I think it is, number 14. Benno, named after one of the very best. Listen, its first up run back from a spell for the O'Shea stable in Group 1 company was had a flashing red light all over it, I thought. Gets a key change here of Pike on barrier 7, $12, $13, opened up now about $11. Jimmy, I'm all in. Really simple staking plan, 100 on the nose. And that might buy us around a drink next Friday at the lunch.
Yes.
Yes, very good. What about you, Tristan? How are we going? Hang on. Late word coming through that you weren't on track. That was at the Gold Coast last Friday. How'd that play out?
Yeah, no, well, you're right. I had to stay and do a little bit of work, and Cedar Power lost a couple of kilos off its heavy weight, so I gave it an extra chance. He looked all right in the run, I thought, the champ, but he just couldn't quite kick clear around the home turn, finish another very, very professional second.
More importantly, what was the jockey's report like? This would be key too.
He was very, very disappointed with the fact that he had to get to the lead, and yeah, so it was actually I was quietly happy with it, but Robin she just couldn't understand. My 6-year-old daughter went. It was only her second time at the races and the first time she hasn't witnessed victory, so I don't think she knew what was happening there, because she's used to being in the winners' enclosure. So it's one of those life lessons, I guess.
No.
And Jimmy, we know as owners that we get the audios from the trainers and the jockeys after a race. I'm just waiting for that day where we get the audio from Tristan standing in the mounting yard if things didn't happen to go right. And I don't know whether you picked it up this week, but there was an audio leaked by obviously one of the owners by a trainer out of Adelaide this week, last Sunday morning, after he scratched their runner on a heavy 10, and the owners, a couple of the ownership have absolutely blown up Deluxe. And so the trainer has then sent out a follow-up audio about 30 minutes later that went for about 3.5 minutes. And it is one of the best sprays I've ever heard.
Hey, Jared, when did King's Trust move to Adelaide?
Was it T. Robinson, was it? The great King's Trust is in this week too. So I just wanted to alert listeners to that, outstanding form from the People's Champ. Race 1. Just having a look at what you've got him up for at the moment.
King's Trust,
$31.
Oof.
$31. So there you go. Great value. There'll be a staking plan around that, I'd reckon. You'd be able to work out that. I'm going to go to the tramway, Tristan. I'm going to go for number 4, Profondo. Now, this will be the staking plan. It's come back in super order. Maps to get a beautiful run from the inside draw. Has a fitness edge over Zaki, the $1.80 favourite. So rather be taking $1.95 to place Profondo than $1.80 for Zaki to win. So the staking plan is $25.75. Profondo. Race 7, number 4, $6.50. $1.95.
$6.50, $1.95. Yes, that is all done for you, Jimmy. And I like that staking plan because I think it is a very, I think this is the time to get Zaki. Obviously, going to have sight set on races further on down the line as well. So I reckon it looks a little good bet. There's already been a little bit of a drift for Zaki already.
Yeah, that would have come off the back of that mail, I would have thought. So there you go.
Jimmy, just a little late push for Sunday. There may be a first upper at the Sunshine Coast in a 1,200-metre race called Plundering.
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 Do we have an anticipated price around that, Jared?
Any price would be a good price, Jimmy, because I happen to have a share in it. So we scratched it from Ipswich today and did win a trial last week, and we thought it went. It looks like a promising horse. So we hope it might be running if the track's not too wet Sunday at the Sunshine Coast.
We scratched it from Ipswich. There was a heavy 10, was it? Do you get the voicemail through?
No. It was called the widest gate of the field, Jimmy, and so.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, we know all about that with King's Trust. All right, gents, very interesting final round. Some cracking games, no doubt about it. I think we can smell the fact that semi-finals are just around the corner as well. Have a great weekend of footy and racing, and we'll do it again next week.
See you guys.
And we'll be at a lunch next week, Jimmy.
Oh, we could do it live. No one would understand us by the end of it. We could do it live.
Especially if Jared's horse wins today on the weekend to get around.
Well, and if we did it live, it'd probably then end up on OnlyFans.
Exactly. Watch out, Libby. Here we come.
See you guys.